Hello Year 10, this video is feedback from your assessment. We're going to start by going through the Socrative answers and then we'll look at how marks were awarded in the 8 and the 16 mark question. So you can see the answers to questions 1 through 6 here. Cholera, Edwin Chadwick, The Great Stink, B, and spontaneous generation. Now, the one that people struggled with the most was spontaneous generation for number 6. And I think that was just people struggling to remember what the exact phrase was. Remember that the theory of spontaneous generation is germ theory, but the other way round. Spontaneous generation is that these germs would appear as matter decayed, whereas germ theory tells us the opposite, that it's the germs that cause the decay. Okay, page 2. The one that we had a problem with on this one is probably question 11. And again, just remembering the correct phrase to use. So Louis Pasteur and Paul Ehrlich, A and C, then carbolic acid, aseptic surgery. Some people said antiseptic, but it's aseptic surgery. And then hypnotherapy, aromatherapy, homeopathy and acupuncture are alternative medicine because it doesn't have... Essentially, it's not proven in medical science, but people turn to it and say that it does have benefits. Then the Boer War and Seaborn Roundtree for questions 12 and 13. And finally, last list of questions. 1906, penicillin. For 16, it was B. Some people went for C, it only protected men, but it was B. Question 17, 1948. Question 18 is A, they didn't want to be under government control. And then the final two questions were questions that people struggled with. The first one is the pharmaceutical industry, and we covered that very briefly when we were looking at penicillin and whether or not drug companies, pharmaceutical companies should be run for profit. The last one I didn't teach you, and this question was put on, the member of staff who made the quiz used this as their case study, thalidomide. I used AIDS and Spanish flu as modern case studies. But thalidomide was an anti-morning sickness drug which was given to pregnant women, but the testing was incomplete and children were born with either deformed or underdeveloped limbs. And so the thalidomide scandal of the 60s, particularly the late 60s, was one that struck both in America and in the United Kingdom. Okay, so now we're moving on to the 8-mark question. 2 ways in which the work of Louis Pasteur and Alexander Fleming was similar. And what I have done there is I have listed all of the things that people mentioned that were relevant in their answer. You can see that there is a huge amount that you could mention. From chance to inspiring the work of others, groundbreaking change, they faced opposition, they both experimented, they both worked in the area of germs and bacteriology, and they were both impacted by war. The key thing for me in the 8-mark question is you need 2 factors, and you need clear, detailed knowledge of both of those, and that means that the knowledge needs to be precise. So you need to tell me when penicillin was discovered, when germ theory was discovered. If you're talking about the inspiration of others, exactly when were these other discoveries made? And so in some cases it's making sure that that knowledge is precise, but also don't forget you need to make sure that you link the two. So in both time periods, what is happening that is similar? And so rather than sort of give you a waggle of an answer where I go through just 2 of the factors, it's quite difficult to do that because students mention so many different factors. But what you need to do is make sure that your knowledge is relevant and precise for both time periods, for both paragraphs, and that you're linking the 2 together and showing exactly what is similar at both of those times. Okay, and now I want to talk about the 16-mark answer. Some of you will be disappointed with the marks that you received, but it's very easy to lose marks in a 16-mark question. The first thing to talk to you about is that spelling, punctuation and grammar counts for 4 marks on top of the 16 for the answer. So 4 marks for SPAG is that key terminology is used accurately, that spelling, punctuation and grammar is good throughout, and that you've got an introduction and a conclusion at the beginning and the end of your answer. 3 marks for SPAG is that there may be some misuse of terminology, some common errors in terms of spelling, punctuation and grammar. 2 marks is when the answer is incomplete or the answer doesn't have a clear conclusion at the end of it. 1 mark or 0 marks is awarded when it's either illegible, so it can't be understood, it can't be read, or there are severe grammatical errors, meaning that it's difficult to make sense of what's being written. Obviously 0 marks is if you've written nothing at all. So there are level 1, 2, 3 or 4 marks. And if you receive a level 1 mark, it means that the maximum amount of marks you can get is 4. It goes up in stages of 4 marks. So if you get a level 1 mark, the most you can get is 4. And that is if you've mentioned only one factor and only written about one time period and there's little or no judgment. So if you've written about governments and public health in the modern era, you'll be looking at a level 1 mark. Level 2, if you've written about more than one factor and more than one time period with some judgment. Now, you need 3 or more time periods in order to get a level 3 mark. So actually I've made a mistake there. In blue it should be 2. So if you've written comments about more than one factor, but only about the last 2 periods, you can only get a level 2 mark. If you've written about other time periods, but the comments are about anatomy or treating disease, then again, it can't be marked as relevant because it's not specifically about public health. If you've written specifically about public health for 2 or more factors, for 3 or more time periods, and there's judgment, you can get a level 3 mark, which is a maximum of 12 marks out of 16. But please do remember that the quality of your knowledge will determine whether or not your answer is worthy of a level 3 or level 4 mark. Finally, for level 4, you need to write about 2 or more factors in all 4 time periods and have a sustained judgment. So you need to write about the medieval, beginnings of change, revolution in medicine and modern medicine periods. You need to write about at least 2 factors and you need to sustain your judgment all the way through. There is a lot to do in 20 minutes for you to achieve a level 4 mark. And if you do that, you're looking at 13, 14, 15 or 16 marks before we add those SPAG marks on. So what it would be wise to do is to look at the answers that I've marked. If I've written BOC and RIM, it means that your example is from the beginnings of change and revolution in medicine periods. I will also have written medieval or modern next to examples to show you what you are talking about. Unfortunately, if you've talked about surgery and anatomy rather than public health, or treating disease and not linked it to public health, then those examples can't be rewarded as relevant because they're not linked to public health. It's easy in the case of treating disease to link it to public health. So if you're talking about Jenner and smallpox, you could then link it to the fact that the vaccine was rolled out to the general public. That is making a comment about treating disease relevant to public health. And many people did that without making that link specific.